366 days in a federal dormitory in exchange for $3 million in misappropriated capital is a transaction with a return on investment that mocks the very concept of judicial oversight.
More than 3 years now after the first federal charges in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, another defendant in the massive $250 million scandal is now sentenced. This as dozens more await sentencing. Live in Minneapolis for us tonight, Fox 9's Courtney Godfrey is at the federal courthouse with details on this particular case. Courtney?
Good evening, Randy. This morning, a judge handed Abdul Abubakar Ali a 1 year and 1 day sentence after he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Ali, along with two others, operated a federal child nutrition program site called Youth Inventors Lab. The defendants claim to have served approximately 1.5 million meals to underserved children over the course of 7 months, but federal prosecutors claim in reality they served only a small fraction of that. In all, federal investigators estimate Ali and his co-conspirators received more than $3 million in federal child nutrition program funds.
We are currently auditing a sentencing deficit where the penalty for liquidating federal child nutrition funds doesn't even cover the interest on the stolen assets, effectively turning a felony into a low-interest loan from the taxpayer. This is the ultimate fraudulent dividend. And for Camillo's house, we are documenting a systemic failure in the American legal ledger where the cost of crime has been devalued to the point of irrelevance. While the federal government claims to be cracking down, the actual receipts show a management team that is rewarding $3 million breaches with a 1-year sabbatical.
Thank you so much for being here today. I'm bringing a question in from someone else. We noticed that ICE was at our local church by Hy-Vee taking pictures of the building and spending the day there. Our concern is due to fraud all over the state and anywhere else. Are we going to be cut off on our food supply because everyone else is causing an issue? So they're extremely worried about their food distribution. And so are we as a community. Right now we are feeding about 60 families in our community alone and going as far as Bloomington, Brooklyn Center, and anywhere else anyone asks us to bring them food. So the question was, what's next? And is there a concern for big food distributions such as theirs?
I don't think there is a concern for food distribution. We haven't really heard anything in that regard. We know that the administration says they are targeting us for fraud, even though there are a lot of states that have higher numbers of fraud than us. We also know that there are states that have higher numbers of undocumented people or people who are on retainers to be deported or for removal. And so we all know why we're being targeted. It has nothing to do with any of the reasons that the president and this administration has given. It's because we didn't vote for him 3 times. But in all jokes aside, I would say every time they have tried to go after us in holding government funds, we have successfully been able to have.
I am Camillo Motado, and this is Camillo's house. As a certified public accountant focused on forensic verification, I look past the courtroom drama to see the underlying statement of operational loss. In a standard financial audit, if a firm suffers a $250 million leakage in its primary service line, you don't just fire the interns. You perform a total systemic infrastructure review. Today, we are analyzing the latest sentencing in the Feeding Our Future scandal, a $250 million child nutrition Ponzi scheme that has become the largest pandemic-era fraud in the country. We are documenting how a defendant named Abdul Abubakar Ali managed to walk away with a 1 year and a day sentence after participating in a scheme that siphoned over $3 million from the mouths of underserved children. We are analyzing why the internal controls of our justice system have reached a state of regulatory insolvency, and how this contagion of fraud is spreading from the Twin Cities to the state of Maine, leaving every voter stakeholder with an unrecorded liability of broken trust. To understand the materiality of the Abdul Abubakar Ali case, we have to perform a forensic breakdown of the numbers. Ali, along with 2 co-conspirators, operated an entity called Youth Inventors Lab. On their internal ledger, they claim to have served approximately 1.5 million meals to children in just 7 months. From a capability audit perspective, serving 1.5 million meals in 210 days would require the operational capacity of a major industrial catering firm, roughly 7,000 meals every single day. Yet, federal investigators found that Youth Inventors Lab served only a minuscule fraction of that amount. The audit trail reveals that the $3.6 million they received was a ghost asset, money paid out for services that never existed. In accounting terms, this is a total asset misappropriation where the revenue was 100% fraudulent. The sentencing of 1 year and 1 day is a paltry settlement for a $3 million breach. If you perform the math, Ali is essentially being paid thousands of dollars per day to sit in a federal facility. The judge justified this downward departure from sentencing guidelines because Ali had already paid back a fraction of the money and assisted in the investigative process. As a CPA, I find that logic reputationally insolvent. Paying back $122,000 on a multi-million-dollar theft is a restitution rate of roughly 4%. In any other debt collection scenario, a 4% recovery would be considered a total loss. By granting a light sentence based on such a small correction of the ledger, the court is signaling that as long as you return the change, you can keep the bill. This creates a systemic incentive for future fraudsters to inflate their liabilities and then offer a token settlement to avoid meaningful incarceration. This sentencing deficit is only a small part of the $250 million consolidated fraud that continues to haunt the Minnesota balance sheet. With 79 indictments and only 7 convictions so far, the audit of accountability is moving at a glacial pace. Tomorrow, another defendant is scheduled for final liquidation. A woman who allegedly used her siblings to steal millions of dollars to purchase luxury assets, including houses and cars. This isn't just a financial loss. It is a diversion of human capital. Every dollar stolen by the Youth Inventors Lab is a dollar that was written off from the health and development of the community's children. The social cost of this fraud is an intangible liability that will be felt for a generation, yet the regulatory response is to treat these defendants like strategic partners who deserve a second chance. While this sentencing ledger remains in a state of default, Representative Ilhan Omar has been forced to address these fraud liabilities in a recent town hall on March 30th, 2026. Her constituents are currently performing an impact audit, worried that the systemic fraud across the state will lead to a forced liquidation of their own food supplies. The information asymmetry here is staggering. Voters see federal agents taking pictures of their community centers and fear a market freeze on essential services. Omar's response, however, was a masterclass in liability deflection. Instead of addressing the internal controls that failed so spectacularly under her watch, she pivoted to a comparative failure analysis. She claimed that the federal probe was creating confusion and chaos, and suggested the focus on Minnesota is a political vendetta. As a professional focused on fiduciary duty, I find this spin to be a non-responsive disclosure. Just because another firm has a larger debt doesn't mean your ledger is solvent. Claiming that a $250 million theft of public assets is merely a political targeting event is a material misrepresentation of the facts. The receipts of the FBI and the DOJ prove that the fraud was real, the money is gone, and the children were defrauded. By blaming the auditors for finding the error, Omar is engaging in a management override of reality. She is treating a criminal liability as a political asset, a move that suggests a total strategic vision breakdown. The ripple effect of this Minnesota fraud is already hitting the Maine subsidiary. Shortly after the Feeding Our Future scandal broke, Maine began its own forensic investigation into its healthcare billing. The results are a systemic healthcare insolvency. The state has officially terminated its agreement with a MaineCare biller known as Paradise Residential Services on March 30th, 2026. This liquidation of service follows a federal report that found improper billing to the tune of $46 million by autism care providers across the state. In any corporate audit, $46 million in unauthorized transactions would lead to a total management shakeup. In Maine, It has led to a forced transition of patients and a reputational collapse for the state's Department of Health and Human Services. The operational breach at Paradise Residential Services goes beyond financial tax fraud. Investigators found a total default on care, including abuse, neglect, and exploitation. This is a forensic nightmare. We are looking at a service provider that was double-dipping, stealing from the public treasury through main care fraud, while simultaneously neglecting the assets they were contracted to protect. When a firm fails on both the financial and operational ledgers, it is in a state of ethical bankruptcy. The fact that this was allowed to persist for over a year after initial notifications of abuse suggests a material weakness in the oversight of Governor Janet Mills. As we have documented here at Camillo's house, Janet Mills is currently in a state of incumbent brand impairment. She is facing a primary challenge from Graham Plattner, who is currently liquidating her support by double digits. The fraud and abuse in Maine's autism centers is a negative equity that is now hitting her political balance sheet. Republicans in the State House are auditing the damage, linking the Paradise Residential Services failure to other entities. They are arguing that the Mills administration has presided over a culture of noncompliance, where exploitation and neglect became standard operating procedures. This management failure is the primary driver of her polling default. The sentencing guidelines for these crimes are the last line of defense for the public, but the Minnesota precedent of 1 year and 1 day for $3 million is a regulatory failure. We are witnessing a devaluation of the law. If you can acquire $3 million through fraudulent disclosure, pay back 4% as a closing cost, and serve a year in a low-security account, then the rational market actor will choose fraud every single time. It is a net positive transaction for the criminal. The Justice Department is essentially subsidizing corruption by offering settlement terms that are too favorable to the defaulting party. As the transition of patients begins in Maine and the sentencing hearings continue in Minnesota, the citizen auditor must ask, who is actually reconciling the books for the victims? We are looking at a systemic failure where the auditors are deflecting, the custodians are neglecting, and the judiciary is amortizing the punishment. The $250 million stolen in Minnesota and the $46 million improperly billed in Maine are material facts that prove our governmental internal controls are functionally null and void. We are operating in a post-accountability market where the truth is just another adjusting entry to be massaged by the management at the top. My forensic verdict on the 2026 fraud audit is that we are witnessing a systemic liquidation of the rule of law. The 1 year and 1 day sentence for Abdul Abubakar Ali is a material misstatement of justice that creates a hazardous precedent for the national ledger. Ilhan Omar's liability deflection is a sign of institutional insolvency, and the autism care breach in Maine is a physical manifestation of a failed management culture. Until the penalty for fraud exceeds the profit of the crime, the market for corruption will continue to grow at the expense of the most vulnerable stakeholders. The March 2026 audit report is clear. The inflows of fraud are high, the outflows of justice are low, and the trust balance of the American public is severely overdrawn. We are looking at a management team in Washington and Augusta that is willfully blind to the systemic risks of their own oversight failures. Whether it's little green men on alien.gov or ghost meals at Youth Inventors Lab, the narrative is the only thing being balanced. The receipts of the actual asset value tell a story of decay, default, and deception. I want to hear from you. Is 1 year and 1 day a reasonable settlement for a $3 million fraud, or is it a forensic sign of a broken judicial system? Does the other states have more fraud defense from Ilhan Omar hold any audit value for you? Or is it just non-responsive spin? Let me know in the comments. Your perspective is the only audit that matters when the public treasury is being liquidated and the safety of the vulnerable is sitting on the negotiation table. I am Camillo Motado, and this is Camillo's House. Subscribe to stay informed on the numbers, the laws, and the truth behind the headlines. Stay safe.